Welcome to the Naked Conversations podcast. I'm your host, Sage Hobbs. This show is about how each of us can make a positive impact and contribute to the greater good. By hearing stories of courageous women leaders across various sectors and industries, my hope is that you too will cultivate the courage you need to make the impact you desire. Naked Conversations are about contribution, leadership, relationships, communication, privilege, equity, purpose, and above all, hope. This is the place to explore how you want to live, love, and lead. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Naked Conversations. This is episode 50. I can't believe it. Woo woo. So you can find the show notes for today's episode, which have all the resources mentioned, including the information around how to get further connected to our awesome guest today, over at sagebhobbs.com/episode-50. Before I dive into introducing you to today's guest, and it's a good one as always, I want to make sure that you know how to connect with me. I'm going to take a small pause between seasons around the holidays. If you want to know how to work with me one-on-one or get a copy of my book, Naked Communication, then you want to go check it out over at sagebhobbs.com. Or send me an email, sage@sagebhobbs.com. I'm going to have a few open spots for one-on-one coaching to start the new year, and I'd love for you to be one of them. So if that's of interest to you, reach out to me. So now I want to introduce you to our guest today, Jessica Hartung. She is awesome, really bright, really passionate, really on a mission to grow more ethical and self-aware leaders in the workplace, which we all know we could use as a society globally. She's an accomplished leadership consultant and an author of an upcoming book called The Conscious Professional. And she really believes in our ability to bring consciousness, humanity, and connection into our daily work experiences, no matter what you do for work. And for over 20 years, she has served as a trusted advisor to those who are seeking to transform culture, drive performance improvements, and grow the next generation of leaders. She really considers herself a leadership activist, which I love that idea. We get into so much on today's show, from the personal challenges that one embraces and faces when really on a quest for leadership that has a meaningful contribution in the world, to what it takes to really grow a business over 20 years, and then to step out as an author and a speaker and spread this vision more fully with the world. She's the founder and CEO of Integrated Work, which is a leadership development firm. And since 1988, Jessica has led hundreds of retreats, strategy planning sessions, and powerful learning events for purpose-driven leadership teams, boards of directors, and C-suite executives. As I mentioned, she's the author of The Conscious Professional, Transform Your Life at Work. She's a frequent contributor to Conscious Company magazine and other publications. She lives here in Boulder along with me. That's how I've had the pleasure to know her and work with her. And I'm so excited for you to be introduced to her work in the world today. Let's get with Jessica. Hi, Jessica. I'm so glad you're here today on Naked Conversations. Thanks for being on the show.
Thrilled to be here, Sage.
Awesome. So I can't wait to introduce you and your work to my community. I know you have so much wisdom because I've had the beautiful privilege of learning with you and from you for the better part of a year now. And I'm just so excited to share that with my audience. So thank you.
Thank you.
I always start with this question every time, just because I find it curious. And I'm curious about it, and I love hearing what people have to say about it. And something I'm always working on myself. So I'm going to start with that, like I always do, which is, what does courage mean to you?
I think that's a profound question because, as recently I was telling one of my friends who is a firefighter about the challenge of making some changes at work where I'm moving into an area that I'm pretty uncertain about. There's no guarantee that it's going to work out. And I'm kind of laying on the line a lot of the things that are important to me in order to take that risk. And this firefighter turns to me and says, "Wow, that's really courageous." And I burst into tears because I know his work and the level of courage that it takes to do things in the physical realm. To have him see and say that word relative to the kinds of, it's a leadership development side. But I do believe that courage is around standing up for what really matters and moving forward what we care about. It is our love put into action and there is risk. Otherwise, it wouldn't take a lot of courage to do it, So I think that when we look at what we're willing to do for what matters to us, that motivation inside of there, that's how I see and feel courage. And whether it's a fireman going in and getting that pet or that person, even when it's dangerous, or whether it's an entrepreneur stretching out a little further beyond their comfort zone, these are the same thing. They are sourced from the same place, which is putting our ideals and then following them.
Oh my gosh. I already was like, I have to write this down. Courage is our love put into action. Did you realize you just said that? That is so beautiful.
Oh, thank you. Well, I get inspired when I ask a good question.
So beautiful. I'm just like, yes. And what we're willing to do for what matters to us. I mean, and it's always, to me, I just love that question because everybody comes up with slightly different, more nuanced answer than the person before, always with this thread of this heartbeat, really, of taking risks for what really matters to us.
Yes.
And that, you can't have courage without fear. So I just love that you shared it in that way. It's perfect. Thank you. Okay. So most people who are listening may not be familiar with you and your work, and you are a powerhouse. You've done a lot of things in your life, and you're moving into some new and exciting areas, which we're definitely going to get to as well. I want everyone to know what you're up to. But I want you to start us at kind of the professional beginning, which is that you started a company, and you had this company's been in existence for 20 years. You just celebrated a 20-year anniversary of a company. I find that profoundly inspiring. It's not super common for a woman to have a company that has that kind of success and longevity comparatively to male leadership numbers. So I would love for you just to share with people what that company is about and how it came to be and why.
Thank you. Well, it's interesting because, like so many things in life, we don't know how it's going to turn out when we start stepping forward. And when I first started the idea of, I think there's something for me to do in the realm of management and leadership. I cannot say that I had, this fabulous business plan and I worked the plan the whole time. What I did was I left the company where I was working and I told them I'm going to be following my heart and I'm going to be focusing on the intersection where people who are in charge of managing and leading organizations, how they're doing that in ways that benefit not only, the success of a company, but take care of the people who work there and take care of the community in which they exist and are a positive force. And that concept at the time was not as prevalent as it is now. It was a little bit sort of like, what are you talking about? People didn't really understand the concept. And it didn't matter because we just started moving forward. So I started to take on individual coaching clients and teams work and helping people build the leadership capability to be able to handle the multiple perspectives and the complexity of leading forward using a design that is multifaceted. So you're not just focused on making money. You're not just focused on doing social good. You're not just focused on taking care of employees or what the team dynamics are. You're focused on all of that. And that's a different kind of leading. And I found that it takes different kinds of development. And the kinds of development that has been most powerful and successful in the realms I've been working is the social learning, the peer-to-peer connections, because there is no one right way to go about this. It's a discovery. And so when we get together, I've been hosting literally since 1999, peer-to-peer groups of executives who are mission-driven, who are wanting to learn from one another. How do I deal with the real-time challenges that are happening right now? Sometimes those are opportunities they want to take advantage of. Sometimes they're issues, problems, headaches. And being able to share that situation and get feedback from others. Sometimes, as the leader of those groups, I provide instruction or resources or subject matter expertise. But what I find, and there's a time for that, but being able to hear from others how they approached it, that's what changes the way they think. Because then they start to reflect on their situation from a different lens. And in fact, they have changed. The situation's the same,
right,
but their options have increased tremendously. And so it just unleashes more creativity and effectiveness for mission-driven leaders who are working in those complex systems to have multiple perspectives to bring to bear on their issues. And doing that over a long period of time where you're building community and familiarity and relationship, that's really transformed not only, our client organizations, but has had a ripple effect across a lot of different organizations because of their experience. I noticed that many of our clients replicate what we do with them as a process for associations. They do the same thing with their members because they've found it to be so effective for themselves.
It's awesome. Okay. You said a lot. I want to unpack it for people who might be like, wait, hold on. That is so rich. The multifaceted idea that was really quite groundbreaking at the time paid attention to what I hear as 3 components to being a positive force, to having companies themselves be a positive force, which is to really look at how they can take care of their employees, how they might have a positive impact in their broader community, and consider the bottom line, right? The financials, right? What make a company continue to have its doors open. So what you really did was look at how do you actually design leadership such that it can meet those 3 and more probably objectives meaningfully over time. And when you say mission driven, so obviously that's something that matters deeply to me, but I want to know how you even discerned that for yourself. Like what companies made the cut of being mission driven? How do you identify that?
Well, we have worked and specialized in those organizations who are organized for a social purpose. So nonprofit associations, healthcare organizations, education organizations, where, when you think about it from a management and leadership standpoint, what are they leading toward? What is the purpose that they, as a group, what does their board consider their mission to be? Those statements of purpose or mission are something that is truly doing good in the world. And that good that is being done is the emphasis. That's the point of the organization's existence. That's what I mean when I say mission driven. So you can have a commercial organization that has a profoundly conscious social mission. You can also have a nonprofit organization that it isn't particularly mission driven.
Right. Because it can be kind of just the structure of how what we call things. It's how what their payment structure, their revenue structure is like. It's not necessarily the heart and soul, whether or not you're in the nonprofit or, corporate. Now, when you started were there even B corporations? Did those exist?
No, they didn't at the time. And I love the way that you just said heart and soul, Sage, because I want to pull that out a little bit further to say that one of the pivotal factors that over the last 20 years I've noticed has really transformed the landscape is the personal development that is concurrent with the professional development.
Yes.
When we talk about higher levels of leadership and the kind of people who can lead from multiple interests and create and design and align people around solutions that work for the whole, that's a level of leadership that takes personal growth.
Absolutely.
You can't do that from a toddler point of view or a teenager point of view. That's not how they operate. And there's a reason for that, is because that's what we grow, after a period of, and it's not chronological age growth, it's personal development of higher levels of mind to be able to hold and work with multiple perspectives and see them as valid. And then to
it really takes something.
That. Yeah. So that's part of where mission driven meets the personal and professional skill development, is that you want to have the ideals and the intention of making things better. And then you want to be growing yourself to have the capacity to do the leadership behaviors. But first, it's about being. It's about being a person who's grown up enough on the inside and working at those higher levels such that you can build those skills.
Right. Yes. It really, actually, you're making me think of this article I just read that I'm going to share with you. And I'll put it in the show notes to this show. I believe it was in the Harvard Business Review, and it was around leadership development and how a lot of leadership development isn't getting it right because they're sort of ignoring these other factors, one of which is not just what leaders know how to do, but how do they be?
Mm-hmm.
How do they really show up? And how do we teach them in experiential ways, in ways that focus on emotional intelligence, what their being brings to bear in how they lead? I thought it was incredibly interesting because it was basically saying that formulaic approaches don't cut the mustard. Like they're not working to really create and cultivate dynamic, effective leaders who create engagement and impact. And that we really do need to look at some of the pieces that you're pointing to, and that the peer-to-peer learning experience definitely points to, because they're relational, and there's a component of who we be in the world, how we show up, what our presence is, how people experience us. And you and I come at these things in different ways, but this common thread that I love is just this idea of learning in community and the value of the relationships that you've helped people build with peers across sectors is unique, I think.
And one of the things I love about that relates to the kind of beingness you talked about is when we think about people of high character.
Mm-hmm.
And this has certainly come up tremendously recently in the scandals in business, the issues of abuse, the challenges we have facing our leaders, whether they are at the root of those problems or someone where it lands on their desk. What does a high character leader do? And one of the things that I think really separates my understanding of when we're leading with high character is that we are leading towards a better future for all. That is part of our mental and emotional investment, is in creating a better future for us all and for a broader group, not just for me, not just my self-focus, even if it's about my career achievements. That's still very self-focused.
Right.
So what kind of future are you trying to create? And how are you going to get there are really some of the central questions of ethical leadership. And how you're going to get there can't be in violation of the purpose you're serving. And unfortunately, even in nonprofit organizations or in mission-driven government agencies, school systems, they're not always very reconciled with how they're going about doing what they're doing. Sometimes they really fail to invest in their people. They fail to invest in the professional and personal development. But I think that the reason I love peer-to-peer learning is because you see that the future that we want, what's desirable, is inclusive.
Mm-hmm. Say more about that. This is a passion of mine, everything that's equity and inclusion and what that looks like. And I think we're really learning as a society, we're up against it in a big way these days around how we really have these conversations and look at these issues of, feeling of inclusivity and equity.
Yeah. And I think that there's a lot of levels at which to address those.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to address it in the very concrete. So I know that, there are many theories and I have deep respect for theory. And I've focused my career on the application side as I'm a geek. I read all kinds of stuff.
I love that about you. Me too.
And I feel like it's not useful unless we can apply it.
Right.
And applying it, when we think about what does inclusivity mean in a daily work experience, it means being able to be curious about one another's perspective and allowing there to be room for a reality and a point of view that's different from my own.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you can talk about diversity of thinking styles or diversity of disciplines, the engineers talking to the marketing folks. You can talk about diversity in age or diversity in race or in nationality. There are lots of different ways to talk about inclusivity and diversity, and I'm certainly not an expert on those, but what I do know is that when we are allowing there to be different points of view and we're curious about when something doesn't seem like that's not how I see it, is our first instinct to make the other point of view wrong?
Right,
or
exactly.
is it to get curious about why and how is that occur to them as something that is true or is the next step or is their suggestion? And that's respect.
Right. Of
Why would I
course.
be curious? I'd be curious if I respected you and you saw things differently. And I was curious about that. Having, like wherewithal to remember that in a conversation, that's the work.
Mm-hmm.
That's the work of professional and personal development.
I have never articulated it like that, but I'm so excited about this idea that curiosity is actually a marker of inclusivity and respect. You know what I mean? Like if you were to look at that this might be getting a little heady, but I just love this so much that if you have a place where everybody is truly allowed to be curious, curiosity is a value from which you operate. It implies a degree of inclusivity and respect for that to be possible.
Yes.
And what a beautiful mission that would be.
I feel right there with you on when we talk about being authentic at work. There's a lot of different ways we can look at that, but I see it in connection with, are we living our values? Mm-hmm. And you can live your values at whatever level the organization you're at. And that's what I mean about it's the interactions that we have, that display of appreciation for others, acknowledgement in those interactions. It's those small micro shifts that we make through our day to align and calibrate with that which we hold most dear. And that takes a level of awareness that is unfortunately not as common as I'd like to see. So I've been really on a mission to transform the way we think about work, because I think it is where we grow ourselves and our capability, and it's where we live into our values. And in the 90s, people said, oh, no, I have to leave my values at home. And then I come to work and I do commercial things. And then I go home and I, have values in my community. I think that that's shifted in this decade, where we're seeing that actually we're whole people and we bring our values with us, and learning how to work together in collaboration with other humans. That actually is an essential ingredient.
Actually, we're whole people just made me take pause. I was like, how is it that we ever thought otherwise? You know what I mean? How is it we ever really thought that there could be a separation? My mom, she started in social work and family therapy, and then went on to really have a pretty big corporate career. And she was like, when this whole work-life balance movement sort of began, she was kind of like, I don't understand this. How is work and life? Why are they separate? What do you mean? Work is part of my life, And we understood the idea behind this, obviously, that you're not, neglecting things in your family in order to go crazy at work or vice versa. But it stuck with me because I thought, yeah, of course.
And totally agree. That's one of the reasons why I named the company Integrated Work.
Right.
Is it integrates who we are with what we do. And, this company is 20 years old. I have a 21-year-old daughter and a 16-year-old son. So there has been a lot of work-life integration in my world, bringing babies to the office and, kind of swapping back and forth between the things that were most urgent personally and professionally, and creating a community in the company where it's possible to have a life. It's possible to have a whole life that includes great professional work, great family relationships, great collegial relationships. And that's the kind of wholeness that I think small businesses particularly, we stand for, or we can stand for.
Okay. Pause. There's so much goodness right there. We're whole people. We bring our values with us. I'm also caught up on the fact that you started this company when you had a 1-year-old. When you just said those numbers, I was like, wait, did she just say that?
Yeah,
I mean,
it's true.
That takes a lot of courage. Back to the firefighter's words, truly. And now here you are, you're about to embark on the next iteration of your expression in the world through your work. Can you tell us a bit about, I just need to know a little bit more about what that was like what that really took, what challenges you faced. And then I want to hear about the next steps you're taking to share this ideas with the world.
Thank you. And the thing that comes to my mind when you say that, and I think back to that time, and this is a part of my experience as a business person that I don't get a chance to talk about, and I'm a little shy about, but given that we're under the heading here of naked conversations.
I know, we just have to go there.
I'm going to share that, when I sat down at my computer after deciding I want to advance the science of management, I believe that people's identity is very connected to what they do for a living. I studied sociology as an undergrad. And I'm like, who we think we are is connected to what we do. And the managers have no idea that they are walking around in these businesses caring for people's identity. That is not what they think their job is.
No, it is not.
And I thought, there's got to be a way for me to work on these issues and to help advance my understanding and our collective understanding. And so I sat down at the computer and I found where it is that you get businesses registered. And literally my hands are over the keyboard and I ask, what should I call this endeavor? And the words integrated work strategies came to mind. I typed it in, no one else had it. And that was how I started this business.
That is awesome.
And it really felt right to me. Yes, this is about integration of as above, so below, as inside, so without. This is integration work strategies. And so I have spent a lot of time figuring out how to help myself and others, myself as I grow this team and our company has expanded, to integrating that which really matters, the values of a collective group of people, to what we do in the world that generates a business model, and that we're evaluating ourselves on those different levels of importance. Anyway, that's how I started the company. And it was out of the room in my house until I had a toddler, in which case it was time to move out because you cannot get anything done with a toddler banging on the door. So then moved out into an office and grew from there. Becoming a federal government contractor was a big shift for me. I never in the million years would have thought I would be running a business that had a procedure on procedures. Really,
right.
Truly. We do a lot of things to fulfill our purpose. And even if it's, the discomfort I had about how you have to run a business in order to be a successful and integral government contractor, well, those are just things I need to learn. So I did. And I think this process of building a business has really formed my thinking about the purpose of work. It's not necessarily to earn a paycheck, although, that happened. There's probably a lot of other more efficient ways I could have done that. But what I was striving for was to build something that was a learning laboratory where I got to experiment with other people and we got to think together and invent together. And so being a sponsor of an organization where we are literally learning our way forward, it changed my relationship with what organizations as collaborative units are capable of.
Yeah, it's a huge paradigm shift, I think, for many, which is that the process of building your business informed how you understand the purpose of work, and that perhaps the paycheck, while necessary for most people to live, right, isn't the sole function of what a job can be. So let's go there for a minute. This takes us into your new line of work, I believe. But, the job can get a bad rap, really.
Yeah.
Like when I left my very stable, secure career as a school counselor inside of basically a government system, which has pension plan and all the things, people thought I was crazy. First of all, like that I would leave that degree of security to create something on my own. And honestly, since then, sometimes I thought I was, like there's a certain naivete that I think people probably have every time they start their first business. And that's a good thing. Otherwise, I'm not sure we would have the courage to do it.
Yeah.
But I have really now seen the beautiful pros and cons of all of the various ways I can work and be employed and make a difference. You know what I mean? And I just want to hear what you're creating now and how it kind of what your dream for people's experiences of their jobs. Because all different kinds of people listen to this show. There's going to be people who are not working inside of organizations and they're not building their own and they're doing lots of different things, but everybody can relate to this idea of, what's the dream for people's experience of work? What is the possibility that you see?
I really appreciate you framing it that way. When we think about a paycheck, a financial paycheck, it's become increasingly clear that that's not terribly motivating to a lot of people, especially folks who have putting their values first. It would be like selling out, right? And of course, we need a financial paycheck to go through life and have the things that we want wherever it surfaces. But even when we're doing volunteer work, and I do a number of, different volunteer roles in the community. Well, I'm not doing that because I get paid, because there is no financial paycheck, but there are other paychecks. And what I notice is that the emotional paycheck, the feelings that we get both from work and from volunteering work, those feelings are very motivating, very engaging. They create a type of reward for our effort. And when you think about the last time you did something really nice for someone else, there's a certain amount of selflessness. I'm sure that you did that because you just wanted to. But the reward, the return, having some appreciation, knowing that it made a difference, that gives you an emotional feedback reward.
Oh, yeah. I'm really motivated by that kind.
Yeah. Yeah.
I really am.
I think about that as our second paycheck, because whether you have a financial one or not, that second emotional reward paycheck is why we do some of the things that we do. And I would like to have everyone also have access to a third paycheck and to be able to expand what their motivation is beyond the financial, beyond the emotional. What about the developmental? What about the growth and the learning that you get from the experience? Again, whether it's volunteering at a board or a committee or standing up and fighting in your community for what's right. Yes, we're doing that for the results that we create, but we also are gaining. We're learning and growing and developing our skills so that we can do more and influence more and be better able to serve that which we feel called to do. And when I think about the idealistic folks that I know who are called on big missions to make a difference, and I have so much compassion for that because I am one too.
I know.
But what I've learned is that I didn't have the skills. Even when I had the ideals, I didn't yet have the growth and development of my own capacities to be able to fulfill that. And that's the purpose of work. That's the purpose of whether we get the first two paychecks, that's the third paycheck that we're shooting for, is help me utilize this experience so that I can grow to be better able to make positive influence and change in the world. And that's what I think we should be focused on and orienting to, because, our organizations might not do that. And it doesn't matter. We can be self-directed in how we approach this. That's not something that someone else has to do for us. So it doesn't really matter what organization you work in or what organization you volunteer in or how you're thinking about, even planning for the next family vacation. Yeah, it'll be great. The emotional reward of sitting and enjoying what you've planned. But what can you be learning along the way? I just love that orientation because it gives so much richness to how we spend our time.
So this is a pretty fundamental paradigm shift in some ways. I love it too, by the way. And you know me, so I'm a super idealist who's also a realist. I feel like a dance in between these two, but this deep, deep desire to make a contribution and impact. I mean, it's the reason I have this podcast in the first place, right? So,
yeah,
and a lot of other things. But there's a paradigm shift here because, at least this is what I'm hearing, there's this expectation or sort of societal conditioning that when you have a job, or you go to work or build a career, that you develop like a level of mastery in that skill set. And they're expected to know how to do the thing that you're hired to do, right? You're expected to perform. Mm-hmm. And what I hear you saying is, well, what if it was okay to have there be an enormous amount of learning through the experience of getting to mastery? What if you approach even your first level job? One thing I love about you, Jessica, too, is, and I'm going to ask you to share this in a little while, is you provide wisdom to your younger self or somebody who is a little newer on the path, of
mm-hmm.
hanging in there and looking at how every job that they have is part of the process of learning and growing to whatever the next expression is on the path.
Yes.
I don't think most people think of it that way.
When I was selling computers after college, so I have had a lot of diverse work experiences. And I think that it did inform my point of view about the purpose of work, because I really have worked in a lot of different types of roles.
Yeah.
But after college, and I went through a management training program that was very kind of ridiculous in retrospect, but then I decided that I needed to make my own, because no one was going to train me in the things that I needed. But I got a job in sales, selling computers,
Yeah.
because I figured, it doesn't really matter what I'm going to be doing in the world. If I can't sell an idea, I'm not able to move things forward. So I
Right.
probably ought to learn how to sell. And so I sold computers. I became a geek, and, I learned how to say press hard 3 copies when we used to sign with, the carbon copies underneath each other. And it was a big deal. I was terrified to do that. But I remember, one of the gals in the office with me at the computer center, I had the National Association of Female Executives magazine on my desk. And, I am absolutely an entry-level retail salesperson, right? So this gal looks at me and she says, what are you doing with that? And I said, well, yeah, it's mine. And she's like, well, you ain't no executive. And I said, no, I'm
Not
not,
yet.
but I'm an executive in training. She never let me forget that, she ribbed me about that for years. But the thing that was really great about it was an identity choice.
Mm-hmm.
What am I doing here? And that is a choice that you can make, anybody can make, because the context for our work really informs what we take away. It informs the different kinds of paychecks we get from it. So I did learn how to sell. Thank goodness.
Yeah. It really helps the business in the future. And there's something really profound about that because, back to this idea of equity, which is a passion of mine, like anything that you're doing, I feel like all work can have dignity and all work can have value. And I mean all work, And I feel like if you approach it, the way you're saying to approach it is so refreshing. What if you approached it as a learning, as a playground for how you can grow personally and maybe professionally? And what would that open up for you? Right. So I'm thinking of like when I waited tables in my, teens and 20s, like, oh my gosh, the kind of way that I learned to interact, to engage, to decide to be of service, to be kind, to be friendly, to work with different kinds of people, some of whom didn't speak English. And I was like, okay, cool. Let's navigate this. Let's navigate this diverse environment.
You were earning your 3rd paycheck right there. Because how much have you recycled that?
Oh, well, you know me and those listening, most of you do. Like my work is completely grounded and founded inside of this idea that connection is really the heart and soul of how we can have both personal happiness and professional success, right? So that dynamic, that engaging process of building community wherever I am and engaging with people no matter what backgrounds we're from in meaningful human to human ways, it's like the heart of who I am now. I didn't think about that though at 19. I just thought, okay, let me learn how to do this well and listen to the people who have been doing it longer than me so that I remember to put the carafe underneath the coffee when it pours out. And you do that once and there's no carafe. You pay attention to people who know better and you engage with them and ask questions. And yeah, that's awesome. I just never, ever thought of it that way. And I just want to say to whoever's listening, what a joyous invitation that is, that whatever you're doing for work right now, or that you long to be doing down the road, how could you approach your current situation as a learning ground, a fertile learning ground for who you're becoming?
You get to run experiments. And I think that it turns us all into, scientists who are exploring our own career and our own capabilities. We're learning who we are by what we do and how it turns out and what we do then and what we do then. And that process of getting to know ourselves by the results that we create with others and running experiments around, how does this affect things? Does this work better than that? That gives a lot of empowerment to the individual. And I think from an individual perspective, it gives you so much more emotional capacity to do great things at work because you're working for yourself. You're working for your learning. And sure, you're doing that in the context of an organization that has specific things. I was a waitress too. But boy, did I have a good time with people. And whether they were people that were my coworkers or customers, there's a lot of relationship building. And then there's technical aspects. My first company was a Mac and Teach. It was a Macintosh training and development company. And the reason I started it was because I was selling computers and people would come back a couple of weeks later and say, that was a really great computer you sold me, but I still can't do my mail list. like the thing that I bought it for, I still can't get done.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, well, how can I help these people? So I figured out how to do that stuff so I could teach them so that they could get done what they wanted to do, so that finding an opportunity to grow ourselves and experiment. I didn't know if I could do that, but, why not try and figure it out and see how far I can go? And then, there's other times when I tried something and it didn't work out. And so I took another turn and rerouted.
I feel like the quote that's going to go on the show notes of this episode, there's going to be several, but one of them that I just love because it feels like the spirit of you is why not try?
Mm-hmm.
It's just like you have a curious nature. And so you've brought that into how you train executives and how you look at leadership and how we look at work. All of that comes with curiosity. So tell us about the book.
Oh, I would love to.
I want to hear. I mean, is this included in there? Jessica has a book.
I really appreciate you raising that because we've been focusing on this from an individual lens. And I think that is a great lens to begin. And I'd like to go up a level to think about what about in an organization? And what organizations are learning is that engagement of employees is really important. And you know what? When they're learning, they're engaged. That's actually one of the biggest factors of engagement is when employees are learning and growing, that actually creates the engagement that companies seek because it creates retention, it creates innovation. And so how to foster that? Well, you can talk to the companies and say, hey, you ought to put in together, peer learning in your organization, and here's how you do that. Or I've been thinking more and more that it's time to talk to the individual and have them feel clear and empowered about how to go about turning their work into a learning laboratory, whether or not their company is engaged. So I see the level of the individual, the organization, and our communities as being the stakeholders in this book, because I don't want folks going through work dying on the inside because they just can't stand what's happening around them and they don't see any alternatives. I think we can provide a lot of alternatives. And the book is called The Conscious Professional, Transform Your Life at Work. And it's really speaking to the individual and how can they take the challenges, the difficulties, the opportunities, the interactions in their everyday work experience and apply some of these theories about how do we work in new ways and run experiments right there. Mm-hmm. So I have been coaching for 20 years, different kinds of mission-driven leaders, and I want to distill those lessons into some pretty easy to understand stories with some ideas about how could you actually apply, what are the theories that we're applying, and then reflection exercises. And the reflection exercises, of course, are where the real work gets done because that's where people shift their own thinking. And it's great if you can afford to work with a management coach or your team, your manager or your organization invests in your development, fabulous.
Right, of course.
But not everybody has that. And right. I feel like this is something that everybody should have.
Oh my gosh. Oh, I just got excited. I mean, what I hear is hope.
Yes.
What I hear is, I don't know what the statistics are on this, and maybe you do, but I think so many people don't like their work. Mm-hmm. And that makes me sad because I have a fundamental feeling that life is limited and that our only real non-renewable resources are time. And that comes out of my early experiences around health and death and all of these things that have sort of informed and shaped the way that I want to live my life, as much as possible for the here and now. I'm not perfect at that. I get up in my head. I future pace and worry about the future. I'm human like anybody else. But if I'm really, really tuned into my values on a good day, I want to enjoy my life right now. And so I feel deeply saddened by the large number of folks who don't like their work. And I mean at all levels of work, from service industry to CEOs and founders. I think it's across level. I don't think that I have met people who have jobs that do not pay well. They don't pay what they should even, and they have a sense of joy. Yes. And I've met those who do not. I've met people who are high achieving and have big jobs, quote unquote, with big salaries, and they're miserable.
Yes.
And those who have found purpose there. So it seems to me like it's cross-sector, cross-level. And what you're talking about with Conscious Professional is that there are tools and access points for hope, no matter where you're at work.
Exactly. And that you're building greater awareness so that your sense of longing, so many of us are longing for meaning.
Right.
And longing for purpose. Let me be a part of something larger than myself.
Mm-hmm.
Let me contribute to something that makes good in the world happen. And let me do that at ever increasing levels. And I think there is an epidemic of folks feeling disempowered by their work and discouraged.
Yes.
And you're absolutely right. I offer hope because I know that we can take that search for purpose and externalize it. And it's like we're looking for a lost puppy. I know it's here somewhere. I just ran off, right? Or you can take that and bring it to your daily experience and say, how I interact with this person who's upset because they didn't get the thing that they were supposed to ship to them. That is a way for me to leave with my values and find purpose in this moment. And as we get better and better, our skill grows, our capability grows, the difference we make grows. And this is how the change makers of our time build the skills to make the change that our society needs them to make.
Mm-hmm.
I am hungry to have warriors of leaders that are ready to lead at high levels of ethics and character. But it is a skill building that goes with that ideal. And today, tomorrow, in our work, in our volunteer work, this is where we build those skills.
Mm-hmm.
I love when I hear stories of people who say, I was an accountant and I did this work at work and I learned how to do this. And now I've brought it over to my church, or now I'm public speaking in front of the county commission because we have some issues about setbacks on, gas lines. People are using the skills they build at work to influence and benefit their communities. And that is the real fulfillment of what I hope people experience, really making a difference.
Yes. There's a transferableness to what you're talking about here. Okay, that these things we can learn, we can grow inside of the work that we're doing. And then we can take that on the road too, and have there be a deeper sense of impact. You've said this several times, and I think it's interesting. I just want to peel off a layer on it a little bit here, which is that it's okay to have your fulfillment come in from various parts of your life. It doesn't have to be that your professional, where you get your financial paycheck, also meets every single one of your needs for fulfillment in terms of contribution. I think people sometimes feel like, oh, if what I get paid for isn't all on purpose,
mm-hmm.
then I've failed or something. And it's like, wait a second, what if you like what you do and you're really good at it and you help your company or business and you love to then take your other skills and use them in other ways out in your community in meaningful ways. I was just thinking of my girlfriend who's an attorney and she works in kind of the mortgage space, that she likes what she does. If there's an excitement to it, there's a challenge, you know what I mean? And she gets financially rewarded well, which helps her family and all the things. But recently she went to a detention center in Texas, volunteered her legal skills to help families that had been separated.
Yes.
And she was fired up. She'd never really had the space in her life to see that she could take the time to do that transfer. Now her kids are older and a little bit. And she was like, oh my gosh, I can do this.
Yeah. Now that is the formula, Sage, is applying what we can do in the world to issues where we can make a difference.
Mm-hmm.
That creates fulfillment and meaning. And my point is that we have a lot more opportunities to do that than we currently are taking advantage of. And the more we increase our ability to do that and to see those opportunities in front of us, the more we elevate our institutions as well. But, that's like a side benefit. It would be nice over time. We'll have a collective consciousness shift.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Focus on the applying what you know. One of the quotes that I love, actually, it's in the book by Arthur Ashe, is around how you start where you are,
mm-hmm.
you use what you have, and you do what you can. And when you think about that sort of mentality in relationship to your skill set and the current circumstances that are right in front of you, you realize that hunger for making a difference, it's right there in front of you. you can make a difference right
now,
there.
right here, right where you are.
I'm an impatient woman. And so I'm not willing to wait for other people to set up the conditions for your success. I'm like impatient. Like, you get it now.
Right. I'm so with you. I think that might be one of the reasons I like you. I know. So you call the book Conscious Professional. The Conscious Professional?
Yeah. And the reason was because as we develop greater awareness, we have the ability to be even more effective. What I found is from most of my coaching clients, the first issue was they didn't have awareness of what needed to change. They didn't see it. And so that first part about gaining awareness was like kind of the beginning of the cycle of growth.
Right. Of course.
And, oftentimes we need something external to help us build that awareness unless we're doing a really good job of reflecting. And then people go from awareness into willingness. Are they willing to do something about this? And we shouldn't be willing to do everything. If I say, gee, Sage, I think you should improve in this way, and it doesn't fit with what you're trying to do with your life, don't do that.
Right.
So willingness is an important discernment around what's really priority for us and what's priority right now. So some things you should be willing to act upon, in which case then you can move forward into building those skills and practicing and learning and running the experiments, which you know what it's going to do, of course. It's going to increase your awareness. And then you're going to go around again.
Right. So it's a cycle, this awareness, willingness, practicing.
Yeah, that's what I find is kind of the anatomy of growing your own capabilities on the job, is that you're moving around in that developmental cycle, awareness, willingness, skill on different dimensions of your work. But there's always opportunity to rebuild new awareness, even after we've built a level of competency.
Oh, for sure. Awareness never ends.
Yeah.
It's a forever game, awareness. When you think you've really figured something out, and then you peel back another layer and then you peel back another layer, So that I love that it's a cycle, because I think as most people's experience when they're really looking to hone and develop how they show up in the world.
And so what's really the job? Is the job to do what's in your job description, or is the job to run around on this awareness, willingness, skill cycle? Well, I don't think we actually have to choose. I think it's better for the employer, it's better for the employee, and it's better for our communities if we're choosing to kind of use work as double duty there, as a growth mechanism and an output mechanism.
Absolutely.
Both are happening at the same time, and they're served by being layered.
They're served by being layered. They're
served
by being layered. Yes.
Meaning to work. And it's something that's available. I mean, almost every job I've heard about, there are ways to use it. And so, the creativity of the individual involved and figuring out where do you have discretion and what are some of the ways that you can add in that awareness, willingness, skill cycle to your workplace. That's really the subject of the book, with lots of stories about how people do that and kind of some prompts and nudges to encourage people, because I think we all need encouragement. There are times when, I put my head down on my desk and cry because it just doesn't seem to. And that's a great opportunity for me to clarify my willingness or build a new skill or, create a new level of awareness. And it feels so much better when I know that's not a dead end, but it's a part of a cycle.
So the readers of this book, I'm really feeling like it's anybody who works can read your book and get something out of it.
Pretty much. I didn't want it to just be for people who are managers or leaders.
Okay.
I think you can be a leader of yourself.
Yes,
the criteria. If you don't want to take charge of your own development and kind of lead yourself to the core towards the impact you want to make in the world, this is not the book for you.
You know what? Those people aren't listening to my show, because if they have found this show, they are curious, right?
Yeah.
So if you're listening to this show and you want to really, really look at the role work can play in your life at a whole nother level, Conscious Professional, where do they find it? How can they find this goodness?
I am so glad you asked. ConsciousProfessional.com is the best place. So you can also find me at jessicahartung.com. And it's available for purchase on Amazon. And we're just starting, my bent about peer learning, right? You've been hearing about that since we started.
Yeah.
Starting to figure out exactly how do we want this community to form, because as the founder of Integrated Work, we've been expanding that team so that I can focus on this thought leadership. But I know that these are, connected because our existing clients who've helped, become our learning ground, they are bringing this
too
to them into their organizations. But for me, that this big shift is a business move. I've never had a consumer approach where we're saying, we're actually meeting the people where they are. We're bringing the development to the people.
Yes.
And it doesn't have to go through an institution.
Doesn't have to go through the HR department. You're literally here, you can go pick this up very affordably and really look at how you might transform your relationship to work.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's beautiful. What advice, I'm going to ask, this is the last question I want to ask you to leave people with, Jessica, which is, you're not supposed to give unsolicited advice. I'm asking for your advice, Jessica. I want people to hear from you around if you're in a situation right now on your professional journey, if you're listening in your position right now where there's a sense of dissatisfaction or frustration or lack of engagement or wanting more fulfillment, what is it, that nugget of hope or advice that you would leave them with while they're figuring this out?
I think there are a lot of people in that circumstance. And we find ourselves going in and out of those kinds of, discouragement or frustrations. And one of the things that, I've studied burnout quite a bit around how people recover from and deal with burnout. And so it's really actually the same direction or same advice in both cases, is that when you're feeling discouraged and what am I doing here? I would start by noticing, what are some of the opportunities inside of that work for you to build a transferable skill?
Great.
How could you work on project management? It doesn't mean that your organization cares about project management, but you could start to work on that. And I would particularly notice something that I call the breadcrumbs of joy. We leave little breadcrumbs where there's something that sparks us and we're like, oh, I like that. I want more than that. More of that. I want to do that. When I do that, it's exciting. So I really ask people to attune, where are those breadcrumbs of joy? Even if overall you're feeling discouraged, find something that you actually enjoy and enhance it. Get more time with it. Find a way to grow it, grow your attention on it, grow your capability in it, because that's how you expand into areas that are even more fulfilling than where you are now. And you're just going to run a series of experiments to find out, how can we spend more time where it's more joyful?
Yeah,
and that produces hope.
And that produces hope. Just a bit more joy, following the breadcrumbs of joy. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
All right, Jessica. And then they can read your book, which I will put a link to in the show notes, The Conscious Professional. So you can cuddle up with a cup of tea and really examine for yourself what some of those experiments might be. Thank you so much for being on the show. Such a pleasure, as always, to hear from you, to hear your story, to see your vision in the world. And it gives me hope. Thank you.
And Sage, I think that your style and openness and creativity as you work with me on this call, but people in general, it's such a gift. Thank you for doing what you do in the world.
You're welcome. Let's do it again.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye-bye now.
Thank you so much for listening to Naked Conversations. Yay! It really means the world to me every time you show up. And if you want to know more about how to work with me personally and my coaching, you can check that out over at sagebhobbs.com. You can also get some great free resources over there about how to make powerful requests and many blog posts full of resources for living a naked life, as well as grab a copy of my book, Naked Communication: Courageously Create the Relationships You Really Want. Thanks again. See you next time.